The autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves as I pulled my old Ford pickup into the gravel lot of the Maple Creek Diner. It was a Thursday afternoon, unremarkable in every way, except for the message I'd received 3 days earlier from a number I hadn't seen in nearly 5 years. "I need to see you. It's important." The text came from Jennifer, my ex-wife. The woman who had walked out on our marriage without warning, leaving behind nothing but a note on the kitchen counter and a life I'd spent years rebuilding from the wreckage. I sat in the truck for a moment, watching the diner's neon sign flicker in the fading light. The place hadn't changed. Same red vinyl booths. Same clock on the wall that always ran 5 minutes slow. Same smell of coffee and bacon grease that had filled so many Saturday mornings when we were young and still believed in forever. I told myself I was only here to hear her out, to give her whatever closure she needed so I could finally move on completely. What I wasn't prepared for was what walked through the diner door behind her. Jennifer looked different, softer, somehow. The sharp edges that had appeared in the final months of our marriage had been sanded down by time, replaced by something I couldn't quite name. She was dressed in expensive clothes that fit a life I'd never been able to provide. Her hair was shorter. Her smile was nervous. And behind her, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than my truck, stood a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Tall, distinguished, the kind of confidence that came from generations of never having to worry about money. "Tom," Jennifer said, her voice carrying the same warmth she'd once used to promise me forever. "Thank you for coming." "This is Marcus," she continued, gesturing toward the man beside her. "My fiancé." I shook his hand. His grip was firm, practiced, the kind of handshake that said I'm successful and I know it. "Nice to meet you," I said, meaning none of it. "Jennifer's told me a lot about you," Marcus replied. "All good things. I doubted that." Jennifer had told me a lot of things over the years, and most of them had turned out to be carefully chosen versions of the truth. We sat in a booth near the window. The same booth Jennifer and I had shared on our first date, though I doubted she remembered. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the Formica table. The waitress brought coffee. Black for me. Cream and sugar for Jennifer. Marcus asked for green tea, which the diner didn't have. "I'll just have water," he said graciously, as if he were doing the diner a favor by not making a fuss. Jennifer reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine in that familiar way that used to make my heart race. I pulled my hand back without thinking. Her face flickered with something like pain before she smoothed it away. "Tom, I asked you here because I need your help with something important," she began. I waited. "Marcus and I are getting married in 3 weeks. And," she hesitated, glancing at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly, "I need you to give me away." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. "Give you away?" I repeated. "At the wedding," she clarified, as if I might have misunderstood. I thought about my father, but he's not well enough to travel. And Marcus's family has been so supportive. They've done everything. And she trailed off, but I understood. She needed a prop, a stand-in. Someone to play the part of the loving ex-husband who had amicably let her go so she could find happiness with someone richer, more successful, more worthy. "Why would I do that?" I asked, and my voice came out calmer than I felt. "Because I want you to be part of this," she said. "Because I know you still care about me, Tom. I know you want me to be happy." What she didn't know was how I'd spent those first 6 months after she left, staring at the ceiling of our empty house, wondering what I'd done wrong. What she didn't know was how I'd given up on love entirely because she'd taken every piece of trust I had and scattered it to the wind. What she didn't know was that I had finally started to heal. "I don't think I can do that," I said quietly. Jennifer's face crumpled. Marcus reached over and placed his hand on hers, a gesture of protectiveness that felt more like performance than genuine comfort. "Tom, please," she said. "I know things ended badly between us, but I'm asking you as someone who was once the most important person in my life. I need you to be there. I need to know you're okay with this." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the girl I'd married 20 years ago. The one who'd laughed at my terrible jokes and held my hand in the hospital when my mother died. The one who'd promised to stand by me through everything, then left when things got hard. And I realized, with a clarity that surprised me, that I didn't hate her anymore. "I need to think about it," I said. Jennifer's smile returned, bright as the afternoon sun that had long since vanished behind the horizon. "Of course," she said. "Take all the time you need." Marcus pulled out his wallet and placed a $100 bill on the table. "Let me get this," he said, as if he were doing me a favor. Still the same old Tom, Jennifer said with a small laugh. Always fixing everyone else's problems. The wedding was held at a vineyard outside of town, the kind of place that cost more to rent for an afternoon than I made in a month. White tents stretched across the manicured lawn like clouds that had drifted down to earth. Thousands of tiny lights hung from the branches of ancient oaks. The air smelled like expensive perfume and even more expensive wine. I wore my best suit, the one I'd bought for my mother's funeral, and felt like a fraud among the elegantly dressed guests. Marcus's family had flown in from New York and California. They moved through the crowd like peacocks, their laughter tinkling like crystal, their conversations peppered with references to places and things I'd only seen in movies. Jennifer looked beautiful, radiant even. Her dress was simple but elegant, the kind of understated luxury that cost more than most people's cars. She smiled at me from the altar as I walked her down the aisle, and for one brief moment, I almost believed she was happy. Marcus stood at the altar, his smile broad and confident. He looked like a man who had everything he'd ever wanted, and I hated myself for the resentment that still simmered beneath the surface of my carefully maintained calm. When I handed Jennifer over to him, I felt something release inside me. A knot that had been tied in my chest for 5 long years finally loosened. I wasn't over her. I knew I'd never be completely over her, but I was done carrying the weight of what we'd lost. I found my seat and watched them exchange vows, watched them promise forever to each other, and I realized that I was finally free. The reception was held in a tent that looked more like a palace than a party space. Marcus's family spared no expense. The food was exquisite, the music impeccable, and the champagne flowed freely. I found myself standing near the bar, nursing a glass of something expensive that I'd never tasted before, and trying to figure out how to leave without being rude. "You're Jennifer's ex-husband, right?" I turned to find a young woman standing beside me. She was maybe 25, with kind eyes and a smile that seemed genuine. She was holding a glass of champagne and watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm Marcus's sister," she said. "He told me about you. All good things, I hope." She laughed. "Actually, he said you were more gracious about this whole situation than he would have been. He's a good man, but he's not always the most gracious." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. "He also said you're a mechanic," she continued, "that you run your own shop." "Small one," I said, "but it's mine." "I think that's wonderful," she said. "People who work with their hands are the only ones who truly understand the value of things." Before I could respond, a small figure appeared at my elbow, a little girl, maybe 8 years old, with dark hair and enormous green eyes. She was wearing a flower girl dress that looked like it cost more than my rent, and she was staring at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Are you Jennifer's friend?" she asked. "I used to be," I said carefully. Lily, Marcus's sister, said gently, "Why don't you go find your mother? She must be looking for you." "She's busy," Lily said, not looking away from me. "And I don't have a mother anyway." There was something in the way she said it that made my heart clench. Not bitterness exactly, but resignation. The kind of acceptance that comes from learning to expect disappointment. "My mom died 3 years ago," Lily explained, her voice matter of fact. "My dad found Jennifer after that. She's nice. Not my mom, but nice." I crouched down so I was at her eye level. "I'm sorry," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. "About your mom, I mean. That must be hard." Lily shrugged, the gesture far too adult for someone her age. "It was a long time ago." "Lily!" Marcus's voice cut through the noise of the party. He appeared behind his daughter, his expression equal parts surprise and concern. "What are you doing over here?" "Talking to Jennifer's friend," Lily said. Marcus looked at me, and I saw the tension in his jaw. "I'm sure he doesn't want to be bothered at a wedding. Why don't you go find your grandmother?" "She's dancing with Uncle Robert," Lily said. "They're being embarrassing." Marcus's lips pressed together in a thin line. "Lily, go." Lily didn't leave. Instead, she looked up at me with those enormous green eyes and asked, "Do you have any kids?" The question hit me like a punch to the chest. I'd wanted children. Jennifer and I had talked about it, planned for it, but somehow it had never happened. By the time she left, I'd convinced myself that I'd never be a father. "No," I said quietly. "I don't." "That's sad," she said. "You seem like you'd be a good dad." I left the wedding soon after, drove home through the dark, replaying the conversation in my head. The way Lily had looked at me. The way Marcus had seemed so protective, so worried about what she might say. I didn't think about her again until 3 weeks later, when a knock on my door changed everything. It was late November, and the first snow of the season was falling in soft, lazy flakes. I was fixing the pipes under the kitchen sink, my hands cold and my patience thin when the knock came. I opened the door and found Lily standing on my porch, shivering in a thin coat that wasn't nearly warm enough for the weather. Behind her stood a woman I didn't recognize, bundled up in a parka with a sour expression on her face. "Mr. Thompson?" the woman said. "I'm Wendy, Lily's nanny. I'm so sorry to bother you, but Lily's been asking about you, and Marcus thought you might be able to help." "Help with what?" I asked, looking from the woman to Lily, who was smiling up at me like I was the answer to a question she'd been asking for years. "Her school project," Wendy said, sounding exasperated. "She needs to interview someone about their career for a class assignment, and she insisted on interviewing you. I tried to explain that we could find someone else, but she wouldn't listen." I looked at Lily. Her face was hopeful, almost desperate. "Please?" she said, and her voice was so small, so earnest, that I couldn't say no. I made hot chocolate for Lily and tea for Wendy, and we sat in my small living room while Lily asked me questions about being a mechanic. She was fascinated by the idea of fixing things, of making broken things work again. She asked about tools and engines and what it felt like to solve a problem with your hands. "Most people don't understand the value of manual labor," she said, parroting a phrase I'd heard Marcus's sister use at the wedding. "But I think it's important. I think people who can fix things are the most important people in the world." I laughed, surprised by her earnestness. "That's a very adult thing to say." "My dad says I'm an old soul," she said, and there was a hint of pride in her voice. After she finished her interview, she asked if she could see my workshop. I hesitated, but Wendy nodded and said she'd wait in the living room. So I took Lily out back, showed her my tools and my workbench, let her touch the old engines I was restoring. "Can I help you sometime?" she asked, her voice so hopeful that it broke my heart. "I don't know," I said carefully. "Your dad probably wants you to focus on school." "He doesn't care about what I want," she said, and there was no bitterness in her voice, just acceptance. "He cares about what I need, but he doesn't really understand what I want." I didn't know what to say to that. Over the next few months, I saw Lily more and more. She started coming to my shop after school, sitting on a stool and watching me work. She asked questions about everything, her curiosity endless. She learned the names of tools I'd been using for 20 years. She could identify a carburetor by sight before she could spell it. Marcus called me once, after I'd driven Lily home from a particularly late day at the shop. "I appreciate what you're doing," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "But you need to understand that Lily is my daughter. I need to know what's going on between you two." "Nothing's going on," I said. "She just likes to help. She's a good kid." "She is," Marcus said, and I heard the fear in his voice. "She's been through so much. I don't want her getting hurt." "She won't get hurt with me," I said. "I promise." It was a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. Lily told me about her mother on a cold February afternoon. We were in the shop, and she was helping me clean an old carburetor. The heater was barely working, and we were both bundled up in layers. "She was sick for a long time," Lily said, her voice matter of fact. "She had cancer. They found it too late, and it spread everywhere. My dad tried everything, but nothing worked. I stopped what I was doing and looked at her. I'm sorry, Lily. That must have been terrible." "It was," she said, and I saw the first crack in her composure. "I miss her every day, but I don't talk about it much because it makes my dad sad. He doesn't think I remember her, but I do. I remember everything." I reached out and put my hand on her shoulder. "You can talk to me about her. Whenever you want. I'll listen." She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw a little girl beneath the brave facade, a child who had lost too much too soon. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Can I call you Dad?" The question hung between us like a ticking time bomb. I didn't know how to answer, didn't know what it meant or what it would cost. "I don't think your dad would like that very much," I said carefully. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Just sometimes, when no one else is around. Please." I couldn't say no. The first time she called me Dad, something shifted inside me. A door I'd thought was forever closed creaked open. I looked at this small, brave girl who had lost so much and asked for so little, and I realized that I loved her. Not like a daughter, not yet. But the potential was there, fragile and terrifying. She called me Dad in the shop when Marcus wasn't around. She called me Dad in the car when I drove her home. She called me Dad in the grocery store, and I'd have to gently correct her, remind her that her real father was waiting for her. "Can you be my dad?" she asked one night, sitting at my kitchen table while I made us dinner. The real one? I didn't know how to answer, so I just told her to eat her vegetables. Spring came, and with it, an accident that changed everything. Marcus was driving to a business meeting when his car hydroplaned on the wet road. He hit a tree at 50 miles an hour. The airbag saved his life, but his leg was shattered, and he'd be in the hospital for weeks. I got the call from Jennifer. She was hysterical, her voice shaking, asking me to pick up Lily from school. She couldn't do it because Marcus's family had already flown in and they were all at the hospital, creating a scene. I dropped everything and went to pick up Lily. She was sitting on the front steps of her school, her face pale and her expression blank. "Your dad's gonna be okay," I said, crouching down next to her. "He's in the hospital, but he's going to be okay." She nodded, but I could see the tears pooling in her eyes. "Can I stay with you?" she asked. "Just for a little while?" I should have taken her to the hospital. I should have found her grandmother or her nanny. But I looked at this child who'd been through so much, who had somehow decided that I was the person she needed most in the world, and I couldn't refuse. Marcus was in the hospital for 4 weeks. Lily stayed with me for most of it. Jennifer came by once, looking harried and overwhelmed, and thanked me for helping. She didn't ask about Lily's home, didn't ask about the arrangement. She just took my hand and squeezed it. "You're a good man, Tom," she said. "I always knew that. I just didn't appreciate it when I had you." I didn't know what to say to that either. Lily called me Dad every day. She said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. She said it like she'd been saying it her whole life. And I began to wonder if maybe she was right. When Marcus came home, he was different, softer. The accident had shaken something loose inside him. He called me to thank me for taking care of Lily, and I could hear the tears in his voice. "She told me she calls you Dad," he said, and there was no accusation in his words, only sadness. "She said she wishes you were her real father." "She was upset," I said. "She didn't mean it. She meant every word," Marcus said. "And you know what? I think she might be right." I held my breath. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been thinking about it for a while now," Marcus said, "ever since the accident, about what matters most. And I realized that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who's there when it counts. Marcus, I want to ask you something," he cut me off. "And I want you to think about it before you answer. I know this is a lot to ask, but I'm asking anyway. I want you to adopt Lily." The next week, I sat in a lawyer's office with Marcus and Lily. The air was thick with possibility, with fear, with hope. Lily sat between us, holding both of our hands, her small fingers gripping ours like she was afraid we might disappear. "You want to be my dad?" she asked me, her eyes wide and uncertain. "Yeah," I said, my voice cracking. "Yeah, I really do." "Both of us?" she asked, looking from me to Marcus. "Both of us," Marcus said. "Because you're worth having 2 dads." Lily started to cry, and I couldn't help it. I cried too. The adoption process took 8 months. There were home visits and background checks and more paperwork than I'd ever seen in my life. Marcus and I met with a social worker at Lily's school, and she asked us to explain our relationship to Lily. "She told me I was her dad," I said, "and I realized I wanted to be." The social worker smiled. "That's very beautiful, Mr. Thompson. But I have to ask, what about your relationship with Marcus?" I looked at Marcus. He smiled, and I understood. "We're not friends," I said. "Not exactly. But we both love Lily, and we both want what's best for her. That's enough." "That's more than enough," the social worker said. "That's the foundation of a real family." The adoption was finalized on a Thursday, just before Thanksgiving. Lily wore a dress that she'd picked out, especially for the occasion, and I wore the same suit I'd worn to her father's wedding, the one I'd bought for my mother's funeral. It felt like I was burying something old and bringing something new to life. After the hearing, we went to the diner, the same one where Jennifer and I had met to discuss her wedding. I took Lily and Marcus to the booth by the window, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was trespassing in someone else's life. Lily sat between us, just like she had in the lawyer's office. She held both our hands and looked up at the ceiling, her expression one of pure, unadulterated joy. "I have 2 dads," she said, as if she couldn't quite believe it. "Yeah, you do," I said. "I'm your daughter now," she said, and there was such wonder in her voice. "I'm really your daughter." "You always were," I said. "You just didn't know it yet. That was 3 years ago. Lily is 12 now, and she's become the center of my world. She comes to the shop every day after school, and she's learned to rebuild an engine almost as well as I can. She helps me run the business, balancing the books and greeting the customers with a warmth that makes them feel like family. Marcus and I have become friends, real friends. We go fishing together, and we talk about Lily's future, and we argue about her homework and her curfew like any two parents would. The first time Marcus called me a co-parent, I didn't know what to say. Now I wear it like a badge of honor. Jennifer is still part of our lives, in her own way. She sends Lily birthday cards, attends her school plays, and calls her once a week to check in. When Lily's school asked us to bring a family photo for a project, Jennifer insisted on being included. She stands in the back of the group, her smile genuine, her presence a reminder of how far we've all come. Sometimes I still think about that day in the diner, about the moment Jennifer introduced me to Marcus and asked me to give her away. I thought it was the end of one story, the final chapter of a life I'd spent years trying to forget. I didn't realize it was the beginning of another. A story about second chances and unexpected families, about the kind of love that doesn't follow the rules we think we understand. My ex-wife introduced me to her rich fiancé, and then his daughter called me Dad. And I realized that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. From the ashes of the old, something new can grow, something beautiful, something that belongs to you. If this story has touched something inside you, please support Heartline Stories Truth by subscribing and turning on notifications. Every subscriber helps us continue sharing original stories about hope, family, forgiveness, and second chances. Now, let's continue. Lily's 5th grade teacher asked the class to write about their heroes for a project. Lily could have written about anyone. She could have written about Marcus, who fought for her when she was scared and grieving. She could have written about Jennifer, who tried her best to be the mother she never had to be. But she wrote about me. She wrote about the mechanic who fixed broken cars and fixed broken hearts. The man who showed her that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about being there when it counts. The day I called my dad, Dad was the day I realized that you can choose your family, she wrote. And sometimes, the best families are the ones you didn't know you were looking for. I keep that essay folded in my wallet, next to the faded photograph of my mother. When I'm having a hard day, I take it out and read it, and I'm reminded of what matters most. I drive Lily to school every morning, and I pick her up every afternoon. I make her dinner and help her with her homework and read her bedtime stories, even though she's getting too old for them. I am a father, a real father. And it turns out I was good at it all along. It's Thanksgiving again. The leaves have fallen, and the air carries the promise of snow. Marcus and I have a tradition now. We cook the turkey together while Lily sets the table. Jennifer comes over too, bringing her famous sweet potato casserole. We gather around my small dining table, all of us together. The woman I once loved, the man she married, and the child who somehow found her way into my heart and made it her home. Before we eat, we go around the table and say what we're grateful for. Marcus talks about his recovery and the second chance he's been given. Jennifer talks about finding peace. Lily talks about school and her friends and her dogs, a series of small, everyday things that make her happy. When it's my turn, I look around the table at this strange, beautiful family I never expected to have. I'm grateful, I say, for the people who showed me that love isn't about what we lose. It's about what we find. Lily reaches over and squeezes my hand. My daughter, my wonderful, brave, impossible daughter. Me too, she says. Me too. We bow our heads to say grace, and I give thanks for the twists and turns of a life that never made sense until this moment. The coffee is hot, the turkey is dry, and the sweet potato casserole is too sweet. It's perfect. It's the kind of peace I didn't know I was looking for. Thank you for spending your time with Heartline Stories Truth. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more original stories about family, resilience, healing, and hope. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see you in the next story.